Good morning, everybody. It is Tuesday, June 16th. Sorry, I got up a little late this morning. We are going to be reading chapter 4 of Sounder today. Good morning. And we're going to continue with that. So, where we left off in chapter 3, the young man was looking for Sounder. So, he had obviously been in a fight because he had his ear. And he was thinking he was going to find the body of his dog to bury it. But as he crawled onto the porch, he couldn't find the dog. So that's where we left off yesterday. So we are going to continue, like I said, with chapter 4 today. Just let Miss Gilman have a little bit of caffeine real quick. All right. So let's see. My hope is that he finds his dog because I have a dog, Lucy, who's down here at my feet, and I would want to know where she was, no matter what happened. All right, chapter 4. After the boy had fed the children and eaten something himself, he sat down by the warm stove and looked out of the window. There was nothing else to do. Now and then a cloud would cross the sun that had finally burned its way out of the gray. The boy watched the cloud shadows roll over the fields and pass over the cabin. They darkened the window as they passed. He carried in wood for the night before the sun began to weaken. Then he looked out of the window again to where his mother would appear. Finally, he saw a speck moving on the road. He watched it grow. "She's coming," he said to the younger children, and they crowded around him and pushed their faces against the window. "She's been gone long enough to walk to town and more," he added. "What will she bring?" one of the children asked. Excuse me. "She'll bring nothing, but maybe things to eat." "She won't bring no stick candy?" "Don't ask her for none." "Don't ask her nothing." Several times during the day, the boy had said to himself, maybe they'll let him come home if she takes back the stuff. Some people might, but some won't. But his father was not with her. "I gave the stuff back," she said when she got to the cabin. The boy's throat hurt with a great lump, and when he swallowed, it would hurt more. If his father had come, it would have been easy. Together, they could have found Sounder's body and buried him. When the boy's mother heard that he had not found Sounder under the cabin, she stood in the doorway and thought for a long time. If one of the children had stood in the door that long, she would have said, "Go in or out, child." "Creatures like to die under something," she said at last, "and there ain't nothing else close to crawl under. He wasn't hit in his vitals, I reckon. He's got a flesh wound. He's gone into the woods to draw out the poison with oak leaf acid." Now she shut the door and put her basket on the tin-topped table. "Poke up the fire," she said to the boy. "Oak leaves has strong acid that toughens the skin, just like the oak bark that they used to tan leather in the tannery." The creature beds down with the wound against a heap of oak leaves. The leaves make a poultice that draws out the poison and heals the wound with a hard brown scab. Okay, so poultice, what she's saying is, so picture the dog, okay, and there's like a bed of leaves. And so if he leans up against the leaves, they're going to kind of come around the wound like that and cover it. And so what she's trying to explain to the children is, as those leaves are around the wound, it's going to draw out the poison or whatever it is making the animal ill. That's why creatures head for the swampland around the big water when the mange hits. Wet leaves heals better. Sounder's blood would wetten the leaves, the boy said after he had stood a long time with the poker in his hand to poke the fire. His eyes were fixed on the open stove door, watching the yellow flame change shape and turn to blue and red. Sounder was jumping at the wagon and hard to hit, the boy's mother said. "I think maybe he was hit a glancing shot that tore off the hide on his head and shoulder. If he was, he's gone to the Jack Oak woods to heal himself. The Lord shows his creatures how to do it. If he ain't dead now, he'll come limping home, powerful hungry in time." "Tomorrow or the day after?" the boy asked. longer, maybe 4 days or more, like 7. But don't be all hope, child. If he had deep head wounds, he might be addled crazy and not know where he wandered off to die. Which means she's saying if he got hit in the head, he might be disoriented and not know how to get back home. The boy's mother had brought home the empty meal sack. In her basket, she had some fat meat, potatoes, a small bottle of vanilla flavoring, which she had bought with the money she got for her walnut kernels. From the bottom of the basket, she took the folded brown paper bag into which she poured each night's pickings and put it on the shelf. She also brought home an empty cardboard box which the storekeeper had given her. She didn't say where she had been besides the store or what had happened. The boy could see that her eyes were filled with hurt and said nothing. The younger children remembered not to ask anything except looking in the empty box. One said, "Nothing in here." "I'm going to use it to put a cake in," the mother said. "Better go out and crack nuts for the night's picking before dark," she said to the boy. The boy scooped up a tin pail of nuts from the big box under the stove and went out to the flat cracking stone. With his knees still sore from crawling under the cabin, he hesitated a long time before he knelt on the frozen earth. Standing, he looked one way and then another, tracing the fence rows that had more oaks than other trees, the far lowland woods and the foothills. "I'll go there first tomorrow," he said to himself as he faced the foothills. "There's big patches of oak trees there, and whenever Sounder was given his head, he picked the hills for hunting." When night came, his mother hummed and picked kernels. She did not tell a story. The boy wanted to ask who carried in wood to keep the people in jail warm. He knew they had big stoves in big jails. Once his mother had told him a story about 3 people named Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed who were in jail. Let me try to say those names one more time, okay? 3 people named Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego who were in jail. Some mean governor or sheriff got mad and had them thrown right into the jail stove, big as a furnace. But the Lord blew out the fire and cooled the big stove in a second. And when the jailkeeper opened the stove door, there stood Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego singing, "Cool water, cool water. The Lord's got green pastures and cool water." Remember, I'm not a singer. "Tell me about Joseph in the jail and the stone quarry in Egypt and chiseling out rocks to make old Pharaoh's gravestone," the boy asked. But his mother went on humming and the boy went back to his thinking. No stove could be that big, he thought. He watched the red coals through the open draft in the stove door brighten each time the wind blew loud enough to make a low whistling noise in the stovepipe. A burning chunk stick fell against the inside of the stove, but the boy did not try to convince himself that it might be the thump of Sounder scratching fleas underneath the floor. He was thinking of tomorrow. Tomorrow he would go into the woods and look for Sounder. "The wind whistling in the pipe is bothersome," he said. Okay, wind whistling. So that has the same beginning sound, so that would be alliteration. He hated the cold wind. It blew through his clothes and chilled his body inside and made him shiver. He hoped the wind would not be blowing in the woods tomorrow. The wind made the woods noisy. The boy liked the woods when they were quiet. He understood quiet. He could hear things in the quiet. But quiet was better in the woods than it was in the cabin. He didn't hear things in the cabin quiet. Cabin quiet was long and sad. "Turn the pipe damper a little and the whistling will stop," his mother said at last. So there's something on the top of the stove and it's called the damper. And so that's where the smoke and stuff comes up. So it was making noise and that bothered him. So his mother was telling him how to stop the noise. The next day he walked the great woodlands. He was calling Sounder's name. The wind blew through his clothes and chilled him inside. When he got home after dark, his clothes were torn. His throat hurt with a great lump choking him. His mother fed him and said, Child, You must not go into the woods again. Sounder might come home again. But you must learn to lose, child. The Lord teaches the old to lose. The young don't know how to learn it. Some people is born to keep, some is born to lose. We was born to lose, I reckon. But Sounder might come back. But weeks went by and Sounder did not come back. One night, the boy learned why his mother had brought home the bottle of vanilla flavoring. Now it was Christmas and she was making a cake. When the 4 layers were spread out on the tin top table and she began to ice them, the boy noticed that she put 3 together in a large cake and made a small one of the leftover layer. Why are we having 2 cakes? The boy asked. But she was humming to herself and did not answer him. When she had finished, she put the small cake on the top shelf of the dish cupboard. The big one she put in the cardboard box she had bought from the store. The sweet smell of baking and vanilla had drawn the smaller children from the stove to the edge of the table. The woman reached over or walked around them as she worked. I'm done, she finally said. You can lick the pans. Now, I don't know if you guys did that when you were little, but I know when my mom was making desserts, she would always say, do you want to lick the bowl? Do you want to lick the spoon? I just thought that was the coolest thing. The boy had not moved from his chair by the stove. Today he had searched the oak clumps along the far fence rows for Sounder. He never got the sweet pan till last anyway. It always went from youngest to oldest, and there was never much left when his turn came. You're tired and worried poorly, his mother said, and she handed him the icing pan. Hang on. In the morning, the woman told the boy that she wanted him to walk to town to the jail behind the courthouse and take the cake to his father. It's a troublesome trip, she said, but they won't let women in the jail, so you must go. She tied a string around the cardboard box and said, carry it flat if your hands don't get too cold. Then it'll look mighty pretty when you fetch it to him. So fetch is another way to say when you take it to him. She stood at the edge of the porch until he was far enough away not to be able to look back and to see her crying, then called to him, whatever you do, child, act perkish and don't grieve your father. So act perkish means, act happy, have a smile on your face. Don't grieve your father means don't be sad for him. On the road, the boy felt afraid. He had not been to town at Christmas time before, not on Christmas Day, but a few days before to help his father carry mistletoe and bunches of bittersweet berries that his father sold by the wall in front of the courthouse or on the corner by the bank. And sometimes when it was getting late and they still had trimmings to sell, his father would go to the back door of the houses along the street and say, ma'am, would you need some trimmings? And hold up the biggest sprig of mistletoe left in his grain sack. They usually sold most of the mistletoe, the boy remembered, but bunches of bittersweet that the boy had carried all day were always left over to be thrown in the fence corner on the way home. Ain't no good for nothing now, his father would say. From early fall until gathering time, the father and boy kept their eyes peeled for the golden green clumps with white berries that grew high up in the forks of water elm and sycamore trees. Bittersweet was easy. Pull down one vine and trim it, and you've got as much as a man can carry, his father always said. But it takes a heap of fearful climbing for mistletoe. They had already started gathering, and half a grain of sack of mistletoe was still hanging against the side of the cabin. If she hadn't had such a big load, she might have taken it, the boy said to himself. The boy's fearful feeling increased as he got nearer town. There were big houses, and behind the curtained windows, there were eyes looking out at him. There would be more people now, and somebody might say, what you got in that box, boy? Or, where you going, boy? Church bells were ringing in the town. It was Christmas, and some people went to church on Christmas. In town, the people he saw were laughing and talking. No one noticed him, and he was glad. He looked at the store windows out of the corner of his eye. They were silvery and gold and green and red and sparkling. They were filled with toys and beautiful things. With the Christmas money from peddling means selling, his father had bought what toys he could for the boy and his little brother and sisters. They had worn out toys too. People in the big houses where his mother worked had given them to her to bring home. He always wished they would give his mother an old book. He was sure he could learn to read if he had a book. He could read some of the town signs and the store signs. Hang on, my word is kind of messed up here. Okay, he could read something figures. Sorry, my word is messed up there. He wanted to stop and stand and look straight at the windows, but he was afraid. A policeman would come after him. Perhaps the people had offered his mother old books, but she had said no. No use, nobody can read in our cabin. Perhaps the people knew she couldn't read and thought her feelings would be hurt if they offered her the books their children had used up and worn out. The boy had heard once that some people had so many books they only read each book once. But the boy was sure there were not that many books in the world. There are now. It was cold, but there were a few people standing or sitting along the wall in front of the courthouse. Winter or summer, there were always people there. The boy wondered if they knew it was Christmas. They didn't look happy, like some of the people he had seen. He knew they were looking at him, so he hurried quickly past and around the corner to the back of the courthouse. The front of the courthouse was red brick with great white marble steps going up to a wide door. But the back was gray cement and 3 floors high with iron bars all over the windows. So in those two descriptions, I want you to notice the adjectives that they used to describe these two different places. Let's read that again. Let's see. He says, the front of the courthouse was red brick with great white marble steps going up to a wide door. So this is imagery that the author is using to describe, and adjectives are a great way to do that. So in your mind, you should be getting the picture, of a beautiful white marble stairway. I mean, it's probably very grand for that time. Back then, there weren't very many rich looking or beautiful buildings. And then they describe the front of the courthouse. Okay. I'm sorry, the back. And it was gray cement, 3 floors high, iron bars all over the window. So you can get the two juxtapositions. One is so beautiful, and then you go to the back and it's gray and dull and depressing. So the author is doing that on purpose to try to get you to picture in your mind the imagery of what the boy is seeing. The only door that led into the jail had a small square of glass at about the height of a man, and there were iron bars over the glass. The boy was not tall enough to see through the glass. And then it shows a picture of the jail, and this will be the back, okay? Not the pretty description we heard about the front. He clutched the box close to him. He felt that something was about to burst through the door. In the middle of the door, there was a great iron knocker. So that would be a thing that you would knock on the door with, okay? The boy knew he had to knock at the door. He wished he could be back in the great woods. He could hear voices inside the windows with the iron bars. Somewhere a voice was singing, "God's gonna trouble the water." From one of the windows, there came the sound of laughter. Now and then a door slammed with a deep clash of iron on iron. There was a rattle of tin pans. The boy felt very lonely. The town was as lonely as the cabin, he thought. A large, red-faced man opened the door and said, "You'll have to wait. It ain't visiting hours yet. Who do you want to see? You'll have to wait." And he slammed the door before the boy could speak. It was cold on the gray side of the building, so the boy went to the corner near the wall where the people and visitors stood or sat. The sun was shining there. The boy had forgotten it was still Christmas. The waiting seemed so long. A drunk man staggered along the street in front of the courthouse wall saying, "Merry Christmas" to everyone. He said Merry Christmas to the boy, and he smiled at the boy too. Finally, the great clock on the roof of the courthouse struck 12. It frightened the boy because it seemed to shake the town. Now the red-faced man opened the door and let several people in. Inside, the man lined everybody up and felt their clothes and pockets. He jerked the cardboard box from the boy and tore off the top. The boy could hear iron doors opening and closing. Long hallways with iron bars from floor to ceiling ran from the door into the dim center of the building. The man with the red face squeezed the cake in his hands and broke it into 4 pieces. "This could have a steel file or a hacksaw blade in it," he said. Then he swore and threw the pieces back in the box. The boy had been very hungry. Now he was not hungry. He was afraid. The man shoved the box into the boy's hands and swore again. Part of the cake fell to the floor. It was only a box of crumbs now. The man swore again and made the boy pick up the crumbs from the floor. The boy hated the man with the red face with the same total but helpless hatred he had felt when he saw his father chained, when he saw Sounder shot. He had thought how he would like to chain the deputy sheriff behind his own wagon and then scare the horse so it would run faster than the cruel man could. The deputy would fall and bounce and drag on the frozen road. So this little boy is very angry and upset. His fine leather jacket would be torn more than he had torn his father's overalls. He would yell and curse, and that would make the horse go faster. And the boy would just watch, not trying to stop the wagon. The boy would like to see the big red-faced man crumpled on the floor with the crumbs. Besides the red face, the boy had noticed the fat, bulging neck that folded down over the man's collar and pushed up in wrinkled circles under his chin. So again, very descriptive on what these characters look like. The bull neck of the man reminded the boy of the bull he had seen die in the cattle chute at the big house where his father worked. The horse doctor had been trying to vaccinate the bull in the neck, but the rope through the ring in the bull's nose didn't keep the bull from tossing his head from side to side, knocking the horse doctor against the side of the chute. Then the horse doctor had gotten mad and said, "Get a chain. I'll make him stand still." When this chain was snapped around the bull's neck, the farmhands pulled it over the crossbar of the chute posts and hooked it. Okay, so they've got a bull in the middle of this chute, okay? And so there's a ring through his nose that was trying to keep him still, but he's still moving his head. So now he's got people holding him still for this horse doctor. But when the horse doctor stuck the bull in the neck, he lunged backward, set his front feet with his whole weight against a chain, and choked himself to death before one of the farmhands could jab him with a pitchfork and make him slacken the chain. The legs of the bull folded under him, and the chain buried itself in the fat of his neck. When the farmhands finally got the chain unhooked from the crossbar, the bull's head fell in the dirt, and blood oozed out of its mouth and nostrils. The bull-necked man would sag to his knees, the boy thought, and crumple into a heap on the floor, just the way the bull did, the boy thought, and blood would ooze out of his mouth and nose. "Get up," the red-faced man said. "You want to take all day?" The boy stood up. He felt weak and his knees shook, but there were no more tears in his eyes. The red-faced man took a big iron key on a ring as big around as the boy's head and unlocked one of the iron gates. He pushed the boy in and said, "Fourth door down." Passing 3 doors, the boy could feel his eyes following him. He saw men, some sitting on cots, some standing behind the iron gates with their hands on the bars looking at him. Each step echoed against the iron ceiling and made him sound like a giant walking. Far down the long iron gated corridor, a sad voice was singing. "Far away on Judah's plains, the shepherds watched their sheep." Now you guys have to imagine the time that this young boy is in, the color of his skin, the way people are being mean, and how scary it would be to go to a jail all by yourself without a parent, and one parent is in the jail. How scared that would be for him to be walking by himself. But he's doing what his mother told him to and taking pretty much the remains of the cake at this point to his dad. The boy's father stood with his hands on the bars. He did not have his hands and feet chained together. Seeing the hands that could handle a hot pot lid without a pot rag open the stove door without using a poker, or skin a possum by holding the hind legs of the carcass with one hand and the hide with the other and just pulling, the boy knew his father could have choked the cruel man with the bull neck. So what he's saying here is he's describing how strong his father's hands are. So he's saying that when you have a wood stove, if for those of you that don't know, it gets hot all around and it does warm your house. But you can't open that iron door with just your hands, it'll burn. But he's saying his father could because he was that strong and his hands were that tough. Okay. The father looked at the boy and said, "Child." On the way, the boy had thought about what he would say to his father. He had practiced talking about his mother selling kernels at the store and buying the cake makings, his little brother and sisters being all right, no strangers coming past, not finding Sounder's body. And he was going to ask his father where Sounder came to him along the road when he wasn't more than a pup. He practiced saying them all over and over to get the quiver and the quiet spells out of his voice because his mother had said, "Whatever you do, child, act perkish and don't grieve your father." But the boy was full of mixed hate and pity now, and it addled him, which means it kind of stressed him out. There was an opening in the bars with a flat iron shelf attached on the inside. The boy had left the lid of the box on the floor. Now he pushed the box through the opening and said, "This was a cake before," but he couldn't finish. An awful quiet spell destroyed all his practice. "Sounder might not be dead," the boy said. He knew his father was grieved, for he swallowed hard, and the quiet spells came to him too. "I'll be back before long," said his father. From down the corridor, there came a loud belly laugh, and a loud voice called out, "Listen to the man talk." "Tell her not to grieve," his father was almost whispering now. Sounder didn't die under the cabin, but the boy couldn't keep the quivering out of his voice, so that means he was shaking as he was talking, scared or nervous. "Tell her not to send you no more." The quiet spells were getting longer. The man stopped looking through the bars at the boy and looked down at the cake. "If he wasn't shot in his vitals," the boy said, "he might get healed in the woods." Then there was a long, quiet spell that was split in the middle by the loud clank of an iron door banging shut. "Tell her I'll send word with the visiting preacher." The big red-faced man with the bull neck opened the corridor door and yelled, "Visiting over." The boy felt numb and cold like he had felt standing outside the jail door. He choked up. He had grieved his father. He hated the red-faced man, so he wouldn't cry until he got outside. "Come on, boy," the man yelled, swinging the big key ring. "Go, child," the father said. "Hurry, child." The boy was the last person through the big iron door. The bull-necked man pushed him and said, "Get, boy, or next time you won't get in." That's the end of chapter 4. So as you can see, people have been mean for generations and generations, okay? It's going to be up to us, each generation, to try to change that and make it better. Now, I'm not saying people shouldn't go to jail for crimes they commit, okay? But for heaven's sake, if I'm just walking down the street with my dog and someone's being mean to me, that's not a good thing. That's not how we should treat each other. So enjoy your Tuesday. Tomorrow we will read the fable. I forget the name of it off the top of my head. Anyway, it'll be cool. It's about doing the right thing. So we'll see. And then you'll have a little writing assignment tomorrow. So again, for those of you that are doing virtual summer school, please don't think you have to do everything in one day or even 1 week. If you want to carry it over to the next week, that's fine. Okay, remember to get out and get some exercise before it gets too hot. Okay, help your parents at home, keep your room clean, brush your teeth. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a great day.